What's going on, everybody? Welcome in to the Daily Dime here on Tuesday. We've got a challenging show for you guys today. A just absurd amount of questionable tags around the league, and we have no blocks or steals props up yet on some of these books, particularly on Underdog. So, going to be challenging to find all the picks we like. It's going to be challenging to talk about our favorite DFS plays, but we can talk about all the effects of these injuries and some of the picks that we are hoping are going to be available on Underdog, especially because Underdog running a 75% profit boost today for the in-season tournament. So we're going to want to take advantage of that, but we're also going to want to be patient enough to make sure we're getting some good picks there. So Zach, how do you feel about just this slate as a whole?
Yeah, we're in a unique spot, like you said, where there's a ton of important questionable tags on the slate. Some of those haven't stopped some of the sites from posting some props from those games, but it's tough to take a stand on some of those even now still. Just not knowing how some of that news is going to break. You can make some educated guesses, but like even on the few props that I did like here this morning, like I had two on Prize Picks that I absolutely loved. I was looking at Zachary Richachet and Luka Doncic for their over on field goals attempted. Mm-hmm. And of course, both of those get taken down here right before we go live. So we can talk through all of this still. Of course, maybe we lean a little bit heavier on the DFS side of things because we do know how we want to treat the slate, based off how this news breaks. But from a prop standpoint, it has made it a little bit tougher here this morning. I guess where we should start, right? Like, let's run down just real quick. And I know you said like you could pull up a DraftKings or a FanDuel page today to illustrate how many injury tags there are. But like we've got right off the rip, right? We've got Trae Young and Damian Lillard both out. So you've got Boston and Atlanta pulled up there on the Underdog homepage for props. Would I love to go all in on Jalen Johnson here tonight because he's got a massive usage rate increase, like 1.4 fantasy points per minute on DraftKings? Like, yes, but unless Boston, who has two big Q tags in Jason Tatum and Al Horford, if those guys are out, maybe we'll have a little bit more love for some of these Atlanta picks, right? I mentioned Richachet and the field goals attempted. I felt very confident in that on an over 11.5 because, he's going to get some shots up tonight with no Trae Young. But, like, when you're looking at Jalen Johnson, how long is he going to be on the court? Because this could be a 35-point lead for Boston if they're all healthy and active by the mid-third quarter. So it's at this point of the morning or early afternoon if you're out there on the East Coast, we kind of got to tiptoe around some of these games.
100% we do. And actually, I think maybe the angle to take, particularly this early in the day, is trying to find some first quarter stuff because as you just said there, like one of the other effects of a lot of these injuries is they're coming in some games that were already potentially lopsided. Now they could be big time blowout spots. Maybe if you go to the first quarter, you alleviate that risk. Derek White over 3.5 first quarter points.
I literally was about to say.
And there it is staring at us again. So maybe that's a good starting point. I saw he played just a little over 8 minutes in the first quarter. Last game, the game prior, also 8 minutes. So I'm intrigued again. For sure. I don't know if we're going to find enough to actually go with that and surround it with stuff. But yeah, it's been the exact same rotation for him. He plays 6 minutes, comes out, and then comes back in with 2 minutes left in the first quarter of the last few games. So if we're getting 8 minutes from Derek White in the first quarter, given how many threes they are taking, how many threes he is taking, I'm going to continue to like that. Maybe that's our best angle for the day.
That I like the Derek White first quarter points higher. Again, like this is something we've attacked early and often here in this young season. That prop will get pulled down and not reposted if Jason Tatum is out. And again, we like it, I think, even if he's in for the reasons that you mentioned. So that's one, I've got you can actually search in that search function. You can type in 1Q and just filter all the first quarter points or that's funny that it defaults you to NFL. For me, it put all the NBA at the top. So
that's funny.
It's funny how it's waiting, or maybe it's because I have NBA selected here. That's probably it. But being able to look at all the first quarter points or PRAs or rebounds, maybe that's something we can take advantage of here, even past Derek White. Like maybe
Yeah, that's
Jalen
a good
Johnson
call.
first quarter points, right? Because we
Mhm.
know the usage is going to be there.
Yep.
So I don't necessarily hate that one either.
Yeah, I think I very much agree. So yeah, we can definitely dive further into these. I would also say, my favorite thing to do is to search blocks plus steals. The problem is they're not up yet today, so we can't go that route, but we can point to the matchups that we know we're going to really like. And so actually, there are 3 teams on this slate that are phenomenal stocks matchups, particularly for centers. Portland, Toronto, Utah, all boost center production like crazy on the defensive side, all boosting blocks by about 50% per game and steals by about 25% per game. And then there's also like the crazy hidden matchup of Minnesota, where Minnesota does not turn the ball over a lot. They do not allow a lot of block shots, and yet they're a great matchup for opposing centers. Why? Because Rudy Gobert is always in the way. So he's always on the inside, putting the opposing center in position for those stocks. And it's not the most like offensively spaciously aware player. So he creates a lot of unnecessary traffic. So while Minnesota is a really bad defensive matchup for every other position, they're boosting opponent steals by 66% to centers and blocks by 21%. So we want to continue to take advantage of that. I can't remember which center it was, but we hit easily on one of those. Bam Adebayo maybe the other
I
night.
believe the last game, yeah, because Minnesota
Yeah,
and Miami, that was the first game that Jimmy Butler missed right after going out early against Denver.
yeah.
I saw like just a quick diversion to going back to yesterday, both from the props and DFS side. First, I want to sit here and whine for a second about Amin Thompson's foul trouble because we found that double-double prop 1.74x on Underdog before lock last night. Put that into a couple entries, and 13 and 8, but foul trouble limited his minutes through the first 3 quarters. So that's a bummer. But one, if Fred VanVleet is out again next time Houston is on a slate, one we should certainly look for. And then like we had so much Tyreek Hill last night, and right, he gets the touchdown, but doesn't get over on the yards, like kind of far from it at the end of the night, right? So it was another one of those nights where like I wouldn't put that. I don't think I'd put last night on the prop side into like the bucket of nights we've had where we're just one pick away from having a massive one. But it did feel like we were, kind of on the precipice of a successful night there. But from the DFS side, like first of all, I see Preston in here. Spurs never losing again. Look, Alex still on pace for 76-6. So we're feeling good after the big win over Sacramento last night. But Preston himself, shout out to P-Buck, takes down. I don't know what contest that was, Preston. Maybe you can let us know. I know you're a single entry guy, but had a takedown, $4,000 win there on DraftKings. Congrats to Preston again. Shazam looked like he went 4 or 5x following up his 30K win from last week there on FanDuel. And our buddy Marshall here at FTN, first NBA lineup for him of the year, 16th place in that tournament that he was in with the single bullet. So big success in the DFS streets last night. Congrats to all.
Yeah, don't forget Albert the last few nights as well, adding some takedowns of his own. So it's been a really good run on the DFS side, and we can certainly continue to do that tonight. Now we actually don't have ownership up yet because we don't have a damn idea who's playing tonight. So it's obviously very difficult to project who people are going to use, and we don't even know which guys are going to be in the games. So once we get hopefully some semblance of news, we will try to get that up. Look, if we don't get news in the next couple hours on a lot of these, like we'll just make something up just to get numbers up there. But in the meantime, if you're just interested in projections themselves, you can always go ahead and find those in the optimizer. So it's not like you are without tools or projections at this point in the day. But it's worth noting, like if you bring up the DraftKings page and you're just looking at the player pool, reading top to bottom at the top, we've got Giannis questionable, Luka questionable, Embiid in, but likely on a minutes restriction, Tatum questionable, Trae Young out, LaMelo in, Boncaro, Lillard, Maxey out, Cunningham in, Barnes out. Like it's nuts at the top. So again, we just have no idea. Particularly, I think Giannis and Luka and Tatum are the most important news, because if those guys are out and Embiid's on a minutes restriction, where are people spending salary? So, you'd obviously have a lot of value then, but you wouldn't have the pay up option. So this is just a really, really strange slate. Like Cade Cunningham might end up 80% in that scenario. It's a really tough slate to read at this point in the day. So I think the most constructive thing we can do is continue to just talk about the spots that we are hoping to be able to attack. So whether from a prop perspective or a DFS perspective, Zach, what are you really liking tonight in terms of game environments and specific matchups?
Well, I think you look at that Milwaukee and Toronto matchup here. Emmanuel quickly is questionable. I had Weisberg up on the screen. Good to see him. Mike said from the Celtics side, Tatum probably plays tonight. He likes the Jaylen Brown over 4.5 first quarter points. That is giving you that 0.92x multiplier. So underdog likes it as well, right? But from like the Raptors Bucks matchup here, no Damian Lillard. So from the DFS side, like Giannis is going to be massively owned, and he should be. Like this is the must of the must wins here for Milwaukee, even without Damian Lillard playing against the Raptors here. But on the other side too, Emmanuel quickly is questionable, and if he somehow sat out again here tonight, of course he's been back for 2 games in a limited fashion. If he somehow sat out, like I'm looking to all the RJ Barrett overs that I can possibly find, right? Of course, we would have to see what those lines come in at, but like if you're talking about like a field goals attempted prop being posted, rebounds or assists rebounds plus assists rather is something that I would be interested in from RJ in that scenario, right? Jakob Poeltl would also look a lot better from both a props and DFS perspective, because this Milwaukee team, still a team that you can attack from almost any position, and RJ Barrett with no quickly, no Scotty Barnes still would be a standout, I think, kind of in all facets here. One question I had for you, unless you want to stick on that game, is Joel Embiid, right? We expect him to be on that minutes limit. That won't be surprising, but I'm looking still at the first quarter points board over at Underdog, and his line is set at 6.5, 1.08x. And the minutes are the only thing that concerns me there, because Karl Anthony Towns is a Karl Anthony turnstile at the rim. So that's pretty good. I'll pat myself on the back right there. 32 of 35 are opponents against Cat in the restricted area at the rim this season. So like you think about Joel Embiid putting Cat just literally maybe in the basket tonight if he gets down there in the paint. So like I think that's a risky one, right? Like could Joel Embiid play a 3-minute stint to begin the game and then maybe come in for the last 2 minutes of the first quarter? Like, yeah, he could be that limited. I also think in that amount of time, with no Tyrese Maxey, the amount of touches you would expect Joel Embiid to get, I don't think I hate a higher than like speculative play here this morning on Embiid and his first quarter points prop.
And his last 4 games against Towns, 51, 32, 34, 42 points. So I think your read on the matchup's pretty spot on there, my friend.
Karl Anthony turnstile. We could trademark that here.
That's a really good one. And did you come up with that on the spot?
Yeah, I did.
I like it a lot.
So P-Buck told us it was the $55 contest last night. So that's the takedown. 55 into 4K. Not bad, Preston. And Weisberg bringing up a good point here. These are the first round of the NBA Cup games, the group stage, and point differential matters. So teams, like he's saying here, you're going to maybe keep guys in the game despite the potential blowout. Again, I don't think every single team will employ this. Like a team like Atlanta, if they're down 35 or 40, I think you're probably taking Jalen Johnson out of the game then. He's one of the only NBA players, NBA caliber players you have left healthy there, him and Dyson Daniels and Ricochet. But that is something that we need to be paying attention to tonight from the wide view, whether you're looking at props, whether you're looking at, just betting on the sports books, right? These spreads and these totals. And of course, in DFS, maybe some of those guys that you may play for a blowout, like on the Atlanta-Boston game, right? On that Boston side, maybe you don't lean into playing the blowout. Like let's say Al Horford sits, right? Like, and you're looking to play a Cornet or a Nemiush Keita or a Sam Hauser, right? Something like that. Like maybe you don't lean into that on the DFS side of things, because Boston, who probably has aspirations to win this cup, maybe you don't. You kind of lean into that idea that Mike is bringing up here about teams really running up the score, and we did see that occasionally throughout the group stage last year, and it'll be interesting to see if more teams back away from that, or more teams buy into the tournament structure here and really go after it. I would love to see the league, again, just stepping out of our prop and DFS talk here. Like, I would love to see the league implement a more tangible reward for the NBA Cup winners that, you could maybe turn into something that rewards you in the immediate term in your quest for the NBA championship. I don't know what it is, but I think there's just almost endless possibilities how the league can continue to grow this. And I'm a fan of an in-season tournament. I know there's a lot of hesitation from other fans, but I'm excited for this.
It worked well last year, and I think one of the cool things that we saw were like the superstars who that financial reward is nothing to them really cared about it, because for the last guy on the bench, that financial reward actually does mean quite a bit. Yeah. So that aspect of it was pretty cool, but I do agree otherwise. Going back to this first quarter Philly stuff, Paul George at 4.5 first quarter points is also really interesting. He played 10 first quarter minutes last game. So question for you, do you have a read on what this first quarter rotation might look like? Because I'm guessing Embiid is also going to be a little bit limited. And 2 games ago, a lot of the Sixers starters, like Paul George, played 5 minutes. They were down by 11, and they just subbed out like a full line change. So on the one hand, I think maybe like if, let's say Underdog is using, average minutes played over the last 3 games or something to help price these first quarter points. Yeah. They're not going to know that was a line change because the team looked so bad that Nurse just said, to hell with all of you. I need new guys on the floor. And then he played 10 last game. So the 4.5 definitely strikes me as low. What do you think here?
No, I love that pick. I would lean more into the idea that 10-minute rotation that you saw last time out is more what you will see from Nick Nurse when he's handling Paul George, especially with still a shorthanded team, even though George and Embiid are back here. Calling out that they were down 11 after that first stint the game prior against the Lakers and just get line change there. Again, I think we should lean more into what we saw last game rather than them sputtering out of the gates in LA. So to me, like Derek White and Paul George, higher thans here in the first quarter. I feel really good about those two as we talk about them on the fly.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think one other thing to note there with Paul George is let's also remember that, he even talked after last game that to no one's surprise, he has seen a ton of traps, a lot of defensive attention with Embiid off the floor. Now he's going to be playing alongside of Embiid. He also mentioned that last game was the first time he felt like himself again on the floor, was able to kind of do the things that he usually does, create the shots for himself that he usually does. They didn't fall, but even he said, I'm not worried about that. I care more about just how I feel getting my legs under me. And it sounds like he's a lot more ready now than he was, a couple games ago. And having Embiid on the floor with him, I think is going to open up a lot of opportunities for him scoring wise. I think this first quarter number is at least a full point too low. I would probably still be interested at 6 or 6.5, to be honest.
I'm looking at Toronto and Milwaukee here now in terms of those first quarter point props, and I have my eye on both Quickly and RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett first, because I think no matter Quickly's status, you're going to get 8.5 or 9 minutes out of RJ Barrett here. I was just going back through those first quarter rotations. He's kind of getting that Derek White treatment where he plays like 6.5, sits 2 or 3 minutes, and then finishes, then bridges that first to second quarter. His higher than 5.5 first quarter points is 1.08x right now. And again, you like that a lot more if there's no Quickly, because you're going to get that usage bump. RJ's going to soak up a lot of that. But even with Quickly there, you've still got no Scotty Barnes. You've still got RJ Barrett being a somewhat of a usage hog on this team, regardless of who's active. And again, it's a pretty darn good matchup against the Bucks. So I am eyeing that one as well. Quickly at 3.5 points, 1.04x. Looking at what he's done, right? He's only been back the last 2 games in that limited capacity. Am I? Okay, so yeah, I mean, he only played 5
minutes in each of the last 2.
Yeah, so probably not for me there, but that RJ Barrett line, I like that a little bit.
Yeah, I actually wish if he wasn't at this like lower multiplier on the first quarter assists, I think under 1.5 would have been really, really strong.
Yeah,
it probably still is pretty good, to be honest, but yeah, I think so. I think here's a big question: like, if you've got this 75% boost, profit boost on Underdog, Do you want to try and find a third one right now? Or do you just want to say, I got 2 first quarter numbers that I like. I'm expecting to find some blocks plus steals picks that I like a lot later. Maybe I should just save it for later and not force something in right now. So what's your thoughts there? Are you trying to find something right away? Or are you okay with waiting? And obviously then if you wait, like maybe Jaylen Brown goes to 5.5, maybe Paul George goes to 5.5, or
Right.
Derek White goes up. So what's your read there?
I think I'm probably leaning into waiting at least to use my 75% profit boost, because I know not only are those stocks going to come, not only is that news going to come, which like you said, right, could shift the lines away, out of our favor, but they're also going to post, and they post a lot less than Prize Picks does these days, but I love those fantasy score props as well. And on an 8-game slate like this with so many moving pieces, okay, now let's stop talking about what I was talking about. Let me pull up these blocks and steals with you here too.
Nice timing.
I need to
tell you. So the first two, let's remember the fantastic matchups are Utah, Minnesota, Portland, and Toronto. Mm-hmm. So we've got a center against Utah here in Nurkic. We've got a center against Portland here in Gobert. I think the first thing to do is let's dive into those. So on the fly, we can just take a look at what Nurkic and Gobert are doing on a per game basis with their stocks. Not a ton actually from Nurkic. No surprise there, right? I mean, 0.7 blocks per game, 0.8 steals per game. So only averaging 1.5, 24.4 minutes. He was at 33 and 34 against Miami and Dallas, but then 15 in overtime against Sacramento. I'm guessing he got hurt in that game. I don't remember.
He's questionable tonight as well. He played the first half last game and then sat out the second half with the ankle injury. I would actually lean towards Nurkic not playing tonight because of them pulling him mid-game last time. Like, I don't see why they wouldn't against a Utah team that, again, is at the bottom of the standings right now. I don't know why they wouldn't let him rest when they have a more than capable backup in Mason Plumlee. And then they've got the rookie Oso Ighodaro who can clean up minutes as well at the 5. So I actually think he sits. I would lean more into the Gobert side. But in speaking to Nurk's stocks this year, that's a downturn for him. He's a 2 stock per game guy on his career, and he's been a hair over that in a couple of his recent seasons.
I think that's also because of the minutes that he's been playing, right? Like he's only been at 25 instead of the 27, 28 that he has typically seen.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I actually look on the other side of that game. I think Walker Kessler higher than 2.5 stocks makes some sense to me as well. Could he lose some time here if Phoenix and Utah goes a little bit small? Sure. But this is one of the better shot blockers in the league. 2.8 blocks per game so far through his 9 appearances in just 26.5 minutes. So he doesn't need a ton of time to rack up these stocks. He's also picking up almost a half steal per game. So he's at 3.2 stocks per game with the 2.5 stocks line here tonight. And because of Kevin Durant's absence, and I think Nurkic is going to sit. I would think that this would probably be like a 6-point line if Nurkic was in there. Suns only favored by 4 on the road here. If this one's competitive, again, it makes me feel a lot safer with Kessler there. That's one I was eyeing on Prize Picks before we went live, and I like it here on Underdog as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think
for what it's worth, we have him projected for 3.05 stocks.
Yeah, it's worth noting Phoenix has been a really bad matchup in terms of blocks allowed, but a lot of that is because of how often Durant operates in the mid-range and stuff like that. He's out tonight. So this is certainly going to be a better matchup for Kessler than if Durant was in, as he usually is. I'm also pretty interested in this Beal number, though, because Utah just gives up steals to absolutely everybody. Beal is at such a boost there for the 2.5 stocks. He's been pretty solid this season, averaging 2.3 stocks per game, 1.4 steals. That's where the huge boost comes into play in the matchup. So I think Beal's a pretty good option as well. What do you think of that one?
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. Right, almost 36 minutes per game so far this season, so he's going to be out there. The usage is going to be up. We saw it last game, right? Season high 18 shot attempts, season high 10 3-point attempts, season high 9 free throw attempts, 28, 8, and 2. Just two stocks in that one. But I don't hate that at the plus number. What did catch my eye here is Mike in the chat bringing up the narrative of the night, which I had not even clocked yet. Klay Thompson's going back to the Bay tonight. I let me pull up Klay here. I do want to take a look at that because that is, I don't buy into all narratives, but this is one that I could certainly like. Man, even last night in San Antonio, acting head coach Mitch Johnson is drawing up the first 3 plays for Harrison freaking Barnes against the Kings who traded him away this summer. So like, if we're getting that type of action for Harrison Barnes, you would think that Klay Thompson coming back to the Bay here, that's one I can buy into that.
Zach, he's at 1.17x for over 3.5.
I'm looking at it. Yeah.
Holy cow. The rotations, if I recall correctly, haven't been awesome for him in the first quarter. I think he goes out. Yeah.
I'm pulling these up.
7.5 minutes last game.
3 shots. Got 4 points.
Yeah.
I mean, the one before 9 minutes, that's not terrible. Another 3 shots, 4 points. Yeah, and maybe the shot attempt should be there.
Yeah.
Whether you're looking at a first quarter prop or a full game, I don't hate the 15.5 either. 3 straight games he's over this number. And
I was gonna say, he's already hitting this number.
Yeah. The game previous, the 4th game, just under 5 minutes, only 1 field goal attempt. That was against the Pacers.
They were, as a team, they were minus 11 in his 5 minutes. So that was another almost full line change other than Luka and Kyrie.
Yeah, that's a good call. Gafford came out early as well in that one. And PJ Washington was active. And we know PJ, is he questionable tonight? Well, he's doubtful. So you should still be missing PJ. And you're replacing PJ Washington with Najee Marshall, which I don't think. I can search that right now. But I don't think that hurts Klay's usage to have PJ replaced with Najee there.
I mean, honestly, I'm pretty happy with this first quarter points 3 pick play now, and I think I like them all more than the stocks options that we've been given to this point. I think we're going to find some other stocks options later in the day, as they continue to add more and more. But this start of just Derek White, Klay Thompson, and Paul George over 3.5, 3.5, and 4.5 first quarter points is really, really strong in my opinion.
Yeah, I just put that in myself, so I'm glad we were able to kind of talk it out here and get an entry in regardless this morning. But again, if you're an FTN fantasy subscriber, you hit that Pick'em Games channel. That's where Alex and I and others here at FTN will drop in plays that we pick up along the way. Preston's asking about Goga Batadze over 9.5 rebounds, 1.09x multiplier. It's a fantastic matchup for him against the Hornets tonight. I guess I worry a little. I'm on Goga in DFS tonight. I imagine when we get the ownership run in here in a little bit that the field will be paying attention as well. Right now, the minutes builder on that first run, Alex, had just 22 minutes for Goga. I think he probably comes in the mid to high 20s. 8 rebounds in that 22-minute projection. So I don't hate that, P-Buck, but it's still not something that I would be windmill slamming in as my favorite prop of the day. If you put a Nerf gun to my head and said, Zach, you got to take a side on this, I would take the over.
Yeah, I think it's a strong one. 27, 30, 27, and then 22 minutes in the last 4 games. That Washington game, though, was a complete blowout, and he even saw 27 minutes in a blowout against New Orleans. So I think we're definitely too low on our minutes projection. So that will come up. The rebounds projection will come up, but I think it's going to come up to something where I have it at 53 to 55% win probability. We're looking for 60, 65% when we make our picks. So I think I'm with you. It's a lean. It's not quite a play for me.
Yeah. Well, over on Prize Picks, they are populating some of these fantasy score props. Just again, looking at some of what we've got on that first run. I like a slight over on Luka's fantasy score, 52.5. We're kind of right around 53.5. I think that could be a little bit light here in a game with a 2-point spread. The Warriors are actually favored here at home tonight. Scrolling through, I mean, Naz Reid against lowly Portland at 22.5. That on the surface looks like one. Like, I love looking at Naz Reid fantasy score props. That looks like one. He kind of fits into that Daniel Gafford category for me of guys that I love taking overs on their fantasy points. Anthony Edwards in that same game, his line is set at 42. Maybe he doesn't have to do a ton to beat this Portland team tonight, but again, without cross-referencing these with all of the projections we have in this morning, again, those will be sharpened up as they always are throughout the day. Those are some that are kind of standing out to me a little bit here. Bam against the Pistons with no Jimmy Butler. He's just more involved overall. His fantasy line is set at 42 right now. That's one that kind of catches my eye. And like I mentioned right off the top, I loved the Luka and the Ricochet field goals attempted. Doesn't look like they have reposted those with new numbers, but I will keep my eye on that regardless. From the DFS perspective, and again, overall, we talked about some of the injuries, but we've also got Trey Mann questionable for Charlotte. Jalen Duren is questionable still, so he's improving, but maybe not returning tonight for Detroit. Deuce McBride and Cameron Payne have Q tags for the Knicks. We talked about Nurkic questionable, Quickly questionable, Keontae George questionable to make his return to the Jazz lineup tonight. Derek Lively questionable to make his return. So that's why you don't see a Daniel Gafford fantasy score prop up there yet. On Prize Picks, we mentioned PJ Washington being doubtful. So jumping back to Trae Young and Damian Lillard being out, one of those situations creates a very clear-cut top play on the slate in Keaton Wallace because of the extensive injury report that Atlanta has. It's not just Trae Young that's sitting here, as DraftKings has, of course, logged me out, as they do once an hour, it feels like. But pulling back up the contest here, Atlanta, it's not just Trae Young, right? Bogdan Bogdanovic is out, DeAndre Hunter is out, Vit Krejci is out, Kobe Buffkin and Seth Lundy on the shelf. So there's really nobody behind somebody like Keaton Wallace to take his minutes in a blowout or otherwise. Of course, Dyson Daniels can handle the rock. Jalen Johnson can also play some point forward. But Keaton Wallace at 3,200 on DraftKings, and over there on FanDuel, he is 4,000. It's fantastic chalk that I'm going to eat. Keaton Wallace is a guy, I believe, UTSA. That would be a question for our Walt Waddell here, or a Mike Randall type of question. But Keaton Wallace is a solid enough fantasy producer at his price that he's a guy that I will just be gobbling up that chalk on here tonight because the minutes are just going to be too strong.
I love that you just brought up Mike and Walt there, because I also noticed Underdog has a nice profit boost on college basketball. So we got to get those guys to drop something in the Pick'em channel for us all. Any closing thoughts on the DFS side of things here tonight?
Yeah, again, I'll have more in the chat once we get our ownership updated here, and as that gets honed with news coming out leading up to lock tonight. But Devin Booker, you talked about Cade Cunningham could be a massively owned. Devin Booker could also end up like that. Giannis is going to regardless, and he looks great. No matter how news breaks tonight, if you're running multiple lineups, you do not want to full fade Giannis. If you're running one lineup, strongly consider eating should be some Giannis chalk because of the desperation that Milwaukee finds themselves in, the fantastic matchup that they have, and shorthanded. No Middleton still, and no Damian Lillard here tonight. The backcourt for the Bucks, Alex, is a little bit more ambiguous at this point because is it AJ Green? Is it Ryan Rollins? Is it Andre Jackson Jr.? And they're just kind of tag teaming. They don't really have a true point guard left. I just don't think they're going to run Ryan Rollins for big time minutes. They don't have a ton of incentive to run any of these kind of tertiary options, huge minutes. So we'll see who starts. That is a game that locks an hour after the main slate begins. So potential there to be able to swap around and get some lower owned options depending on how Milwaukee runs it out here. But it also feels like no matter how it breaks with their starters, that it's not going to be a guy I'm like, oh, give me Ryan Rollins in all 20 of my lineups tonight, as we did with an Amin Thompson last night. Other notes I
Thompson, by the
had,
way, last night got to 92% owned. That might be the highest I've seen in some time, especially for someone who wasn't like $3,000, right? Like he was cheap, but he wasn't free. So that was a pretty wild ownership to see. But
those 8% probably didn't win much last night because even though he was he was limited a little bit by the fouls and stuff, still got there. Watch that Nurk news. I think, like I mentioned earlier, I think Goga could pick up some attention from the field. Mason Plumlee would be a fantastic pivot, or just even a fantastic standalone play on DraftKings. You could pair those two guys. Mm-hmm. I still think DeAnthony Melton is a solid value on both sites. But I would also listen to an argument that the way Steve Kerr is running these rotations this year, that we should maybe be a little bit wary depending on how high that ownership comes in at. And also in that Phoenix-Utah, sorry, is it long-winded here? I know. In that Phoenix-Utah matchup, Lauri Markkanen, underpriced on both sites. He's somebody that I'm looking to in tournaments.
Yeah, I just think the Melton point is a really good one, because I think a lot of the times when we think about players and their minutes outlook and their production outlook, we can often say like this player's minutes are tied to his production. If he's playing well, he's going to be on the court. Melton strikes me as one where his minutes are oftentimes out of his control. His minutes might be more dependent on how hot is Buddy Hield from three, right? So that adds a little bit of uncertainty around his minutes that makes me a little bit wary when he's super popular, and when he's contrarian, it means we maybe want to take the swings in those instances instead. So I think that's just a good one to touch on, and just a good way to always be thinking about a player's outlook and how worth the ownership a guy is. I think obviously you want as much as possible to be in the player's control.
We could also maybe look more into how DeAnthony Melton has guarded guys like Kyrie and Luka in the past, because DeAnthony Melton healthy is a pest out there on the perimeter. And I think that could play a big role in those minutes staying very strong tonight for a guy like Melton. But, something to look into as the day goes on. And I see Weisberg in here jumping back to the Milwaukee stuff, saying AJ Green feels like their best guard option, which is gross. I agree. I think that's the way the minutes broke kind of in shorthanded situations over a couple games early this season, where AJ Green does get that longer run out. But we'll have to see what that lineup ends up looking like closer to lock.
Shout out to Mike and Preston, by the way. Mike saying he took that 3-man first quarter prop play over on Underdog. Shout out to you, Mike, for giving us the Klay Thompson inspiration there.
Yeah.
And shout out to Preston as well for being in the chat. I saw Zed as well in here. And Preston, once again, congratulations on your huge hit last night. Let's see some more.
I tried to avoid highlighting Zed's comment because I'm always talking about Wemby, but the 360 block was pretty sick.
It really was. Let's see, where was that up there? Yeah.
Up near the top, I think, when I was talking.
There was. I actually saw you read it and decide not to speak on it. So that's growth. That's personal growth on your end, Zach. But yeah, it was. If there was ever a Wemby play to talk about, it was that one. So appreciate all you guys jumping in here. Hit the like button on your way out. And if you're watching along on Twitter today, reminder, anytime you want to participate in the chat, give us some ideas, have us talk through some props that you are maybe interested in, just jump in the YouTube chat. You'll be able to participate live along with us. So thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow, same time.